Brittany Louise from Tombow, and so excited to have Jessica Mack here teaching you guys all about how to use our brand new ABT Pro alcohol-based markers. She's going to show you guys how to use them to create some really awesome paper flowers today. So we're just going to wait a minute while we let people come in. Please say hello on the chat. We would love to see where you're from. It's really fun to see where everybody's from. So make sure you let us know. Let us know if you've used the ABT Pro yet. Just anything that you want to let us know. So I will be checking out the chat throughout Jessica's class, and I will answer questions that you have about Tombow or about the products. And then if there's anything that we need Jessica to answer for us, then we'll make sure that she can answer. So we'll keep letting people in. And again, for anyone who's just joining, I'm Brittany from Tombow, and Jessica here from Brown Paper Bunny is going to be teaching your class today. You're going to learn everything about our new ABT Pro alcohol-based markers. I saw someone asking a question about all the markers that we offer. So you guys probably know about our dual brush pens. Those are the markers that we're really well known for. They're our water-based markers. But today, Jessica is going to be using our brand new ABT Pro alcohol-based markers. They're available right now exclusively at Michael's. You can get them. There's 107 different colors and a colorless blender pen. They have permanent alcohol-based ink. You can get really rich, vibrant colors with them. And Jessica's going to show you all about how to use them and to get the most out of those markers. It looks like I think we're good as far as people coming in. I don't see the numbers jumping up anymore. So Jessica, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Great, thank you, Brittany. I'm Jessica, also known as Brown Paper Bunny on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere else. And I'm really excited to share this project with you and the new Tombow ABT Pro alcohol-based markers. So, make sure you are following Michael's Stores, Tombow USA. See if I can hold this up. Is it going to be backwards? Probably. I'll leave it on my desk so you can see. And if you're sharing your projects, use hashtag Make It With Michaels, and sharing art matters so we can come and give you some love and see your creations. All right, so let's go over all of the different products. Can we switch it over to my desk? Here we go. Okay, so we're gonna use the ABT Pro alcohol-based nature palette today. If you don't have these, or I know some of you have ordered them and you're just waiting for them to arrive, you can also use the Tombow dual brush pens if you already have some of these. They are different though. The ABT Pro are alcohol-based, so they don't blend in quite the same way on the paper, whereas the dual brush pens are water-based ink, so you can blend them with water and things like that, whereas the alcohol-based markers will stay put on the paper and not blend if you go over them with a different color or with water on this particular paper we're using. So we're also going to be using a mono drawing pen, which is a fine tipped pen. It's a water-based pigment ink, which I really love for outlines and details, super useful. We'll also use the Tombow permanent adhesive, which is a roller. So it's really easy, no mess application, one of my favorites. You'll need some scissors. I've got some big scissors for cutting around the larger shapes, but then I've got some tiny little super sharp pointy scissors, which I think they might actually be fabric or sewing scissors, but I love them for cutting around some of the smaller details. And you'll need some paper. I'm using Strathmore Bristol paper because it's thick enough that your flowers aren't going to just sort of wilt and flop over. But the ABT Pro alcohol-based markers draw on them really beautifully, and you get a nice sort of even finish. Any questions about the material so far, or anything before we get started?
It looks like people are just asking what they could use instead of the markers, but I think, you know, colored pencils, other markers, anything that you would color with.
Yeah, that's true. You may not get exactly the same effect as using the ABT Pro alcohol-based markers, but also this class will be recorded and available tomorrow on Michael's website. So if you're still waiting for your supplies to arrive, you'll still be able to rewatch the class later if you need to. Okay, any other questions before we dive right in?
Can you explain what the monopermanent adhesive is going to be for with the project? Somebody's asking about what the adhesive roller actually does.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm using that to stick all of the cutout flowers into their little container. And you could make a pot, or you could cut out a little paper bow to sort of pretend that they're all tied together. And so I'm using that to stick all of that together and make sure it stays put. But if you just want your flowers to be single loose flowers, or leave them on the paper and not cut them out, then you don't really need the adhesive today for that project. So that makes sense.
I think you're good as far as questions go.
All right, well, let's get started. Clear a little bit of space. Okay, so grab yourself a sheet of your paper. And I want to point out too that with all of these flowers, you can obviously choose any colors you like. If you want to do, you know, blue daisies, or, you know, pink lavender, like totally up to you. Go crazy with it. Experiment a little bit with the colors. Okay, the first one that we'll start with is this sort of stylized lavender. Lavender is one of my absolute favorites, and it's super easy to draw. So put it there. First, I'm going to use P249, which is the dark green ABT Pro, and we're just going to draw a little line. And as you push down on the brush tip, you can see the line gets thicker. So if you want to do a thinner line, just use the very tip. You can also, if you wanted to, use the chisel tip on the other end. If you want a fat line, hold it sideways and press down so that you get the whole marker tip touching the paper. But if you want to do a thin line, you can just use the point. So it's really versatile. So once you've got your stem drawn, I'm going to choose the P673, the light purple here. But again, you could use blue, you could use pink, like go crazy with whatever you've got. And again, I'm going to use the brush tip to start doing these little sort of flower petals. So at the top, I'm just doing 3 little kind of upside down tear shapes together. And then working our way down either side with just 2 of the same sorts of shapes, slightly overlapping on either side. So it's almost like little butterfly wings, if you will, on either side of the stalk or the stem. So just keep going. Work your way down. And you can draw these as big or as small as you want. I just want to draw them big enough that you can see what I'm doing. These little flower bouquets are really fun to mail to people because they're flat and they won't wilt or die. So it's a really fun way to send somebody some flowers. You can also use them as bookmarks, you can stick them onto cards. I mean, there's so many different things you can do with pretty flat paper flowers. I'd love to see in the comments what else you could think of, or what you might want to use your flowers for once they're finished. I'm sure we've got some very creative uses that we can come up with. So keep drawing your little butterfly shapes all the way down. Okay.
People are saying
Stop.
that, oh, sorry, Jessica, I was
No,
going to
no.
let you know, people are saying that they would use their flowers for birthday cards, bookmarks, decorating their agenda, on the front of a Father's Day card. Those are all really great ideas.
Oh, of course, Father's Day is coming up. Got to make those cards now. So once you've got all of your little shapes drawn in the first color, you can switch over to a slightly darker color, or you could use maybe one of the blues if you want, just to give a little bit more detail and highlight or kind of shading at the bottom. So I'll hold this up so you can kind of see, but a little bit of the darker purple at the bottom of each of these petals here. So again, I'm using the brush tip for this too, and just the very top of the tip, so it's a nice thin line, and just going around each of the petals, doing a little line to sort of indicate some shadow, or just to separate some of the flower petals from each other. So feel free, if I'm going too fast or if I'm going too slow, let me know in the comments, and Brittany will tell me to slow down or speed up. So one thing I really love about the ABT Pro is how vibrant the ink is. For want of a better word, I think they're really juicy. The ink is just really saturated and colorful, which I love. I love all the color. Give me as much color as possible. So it's one thing I really love about these.
Jessica,
and the fact that you can, yep.
People are asking to go just a little bit slower.
Oh yeah, no problem at all. I'll let people catch up a little bit. I love that you can, do exactly what we're doing now, layering the color over the top, and it's not bleeding together or blending too much. You can blend these, specifically if you use marker paper and use a colorless blender, you can blend them really nicely. But unlike the jewel brush pens, which are water-based ink, which I also love and love to blend with, if you did the same thing with the jewel brush pens, you might start to pick up some of that color onto your brush, and it may not be quite as sort of clean and keeping the colors separate. So that's why I love these, different uses for different markers. Okay, just finish up these little shading lines. And there you have some stylized lavender. And you can feel free to make a couple of these. You could do, a big one and a small one, or, make a couple at a time if you like. So you can use them together in your bouquet, or you could use one in the bouquet and stick one onto a card, or in your art journal or something else. Okay, one of my other favorites is these little daisies. They're super easy to draw. But again, you can do them in any color, and they really brighten things up. They're such a happy looking flower. So for this one, I'm going to use the yellow, which is P991. And I'm also going to use the brown, which is 947. So to get started, just stay a little bit away from the edge, because you want to leave enough room for petals, and draw a circle. And again, I'm using the brush tip for this part. and just go back and forth until it's all filled in. Something to note about the ABT Pro markers is depending on the paper you're using, you might actually want to just give it a few seconds to see how it's going to look when it dries. And if you're using a very porous paper, sometimes the ink will just spread a little bit, so you don't need to color right up to the lines of things. It's just the way alcohol ink works, so just keep that in mind. Okay, if we're ready to move on to our petals, hopefully everybody's all set. So I like to start at the top, and we're just going to draw 2 curved lines that meet on either end. And then fill that in. And then leave a little tiny gap here and do the same thing. We're just going to work our way around doing the same curved petals. And some can be big, some can be small. You know, flowers in real life are never completely symmetrical and even. And I think a little bit of difference gives it, you know, something a little bit extra and a little bit of beauty. So curved line, and then just filling it in. Any questions, or anybody need more clarification on anything?
Not seeing any questions right now.
I'll take that as a good sign. Okay. And if you need to, if it helps, you can just turn the paper as you're drawing. Just whatever is easy and comfortable for you to do. I'm going to do one more in the middle here. And now we're going to go around and just fill in each of these gaps. And it's okay if the color overlaps and you can't really tell where one petal starts and one petal ends, because at the end we'll use our mono drawing pen to add some of the line work and just differentiate each of the petals from each other. So pick a gap and just fill it in with the same shaped petal as we were doing. And like I mentioned, don't be scared to let them overlap a little bit. These flowers often have kind of layers of petals, some in front and some behind. So we can kind of replicate that in our drawing. Keep working, got one more petal. And just remembering, if you push down a little bit harder on the brush tip, you can cover a bigger area at once, because it'll sort of flatten against the paper and you can get more ink down. And I always, just to note too, when using brush markers, I always pull away from the tip. I never push into the tip because you don't want to damage that tip at all. So for example, just pulling away from the edge. Hopefully that makes sense. Even when I'm sort of going sideways, I'm still at a little bit of an angle. So I'm pulling away from the tip there. You can just darken up a few of these petals if you like by adding a second layer, which is something else I really love about the ABT Pro, is once you've done a first layer of ink and it's dried, you can go back over with the exact same color to create shadows or a little bit more depth or color. They really layer beautifully. It's really nice. Okay. Now, oh, and sorry, another thing, you just with the layering, you can layer different colors on top of each other. So if I wanted this brown to be a little bit more yellow, I can just go right over the top and just give it a slight yellowness to it. Okay, now we're going to do the stem, and we'll do just some simple little leaves as well. I'm going to use the mid green tone, which is P195. And for this part, I'm going to use the chisel tip on the end here. So you can use a brush tip or the chisel tip, but the chisel tip works really nicely for lines and this sort of thing. So I'm going to just pick a spot kind of in between two of the petals here and draw a line down. And for making a paper flower bouquet, you want to give yourself a little bit of length so you've got room to have some be taller and some be shorter once you arrange it all. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker by doing one more line just next to it. And I'm using the very tip of the chisel edge at the moment. And then some leaves. They're similar to the shapes of the petals in that they're just two curves that meet up, but I'm going to give them a little bit of a, I'm not sure what to call it, a little bit of a wiggle on the edge here so that they're skinnier and then get fatter where they join the stem. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll just show you. So fat, skinny, skinny, fatter at the bottom. And the chisel tip's also really great for filling in bigger areas of color because you can lay it down sideways and get a much thicker line. And then just move over to the point for the smaller spots. And you've got your first leaf. How are we going? Are people at the same spot that I am, or should I slow down a little bit? Don't want to move too far ahead.
I think you've got a little bit of both. Some people are saying slow down, some are saying go faster. So I think you're probably doing pretty good. Okay. Right in the middle.
All right, and just a reminder, if you do miss anything, the recording of this class will be up on Michael's website tomorrow. So you can always go back in and just see anything that you missed or wanted to go over again. All right, for the second leaf, I'm going to move down the stem a little bit and do the same thing. So bigger at the base to a narrow point and then back down the same way. And then fill it in. And with the ABT Pros, while the ink is wet, so if you're filling in a large area of color like this, the more ink you put down, the more it will actually kind of blend together by itself and give you a more vibrant, very even looking color. You can see this leaf is already starting to dry, and as it dries, the color becomes really even, which I really like. Great for these sorts of illustrations and things. Okay. Next, I think we'll draw, I don't even know what to call these flowers, but I love them because you can definitely do them in any color you want and they still look really cute. So we might do a taller one like this one here. And I'm going to start with P803, which is the lighter of the pinks that's included in the nature palette. And we're going to do 5 petals, and they really can be uneven, a little bit ragged at the edges. And yeah, they don't have to all be the same size or anything. So starting out, I'm just going to do a small circle in the middle, not as big as the daisy that we did before. And that'll be your center of the flower. And then the first petal I usually do is the one at the top, because it sort of tells me, you know, where to place all of the others. And depending on how big I start, that first petal will kind of drive, you know, the size of the others to fit them all in. So just sort of go out on either side like a V shape, and then do kind of some little squiggly lines to connect them up. And then there's your first petal outline. And then all you have to do is just color it in. And for this part, you could use the chisel tip or the brush tip. Either would work really well for coloring in this big area.
Jessica, a question that we have from Vicky is about not outlining yet. So your choice to not outline, is that just because you're working only in the the ABT Pro first, and then you want to go back, or are you letting the ink dry before you go over it with the drawing pen?
I do like to add outlines at the end, because I like to make sure that the ink is completely dry and be able to add a lot of layers. And Brittany, you might be able to answer this better than me, because I still need to do some testing with different pens, but I believe you can go over the top of the mono drawing pen and it won't sort of smudge it the way it would if you were using the water-based dual brush pen. But Brittany, correct me if that's not true.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's true as well. Since the mono drawing pen is water-based, it takes just a second to dry, but you should be able to go over top of it with the ABT Pro.
So, I mean, I can always do a little test here for you. If you did want to do the outlines first, you could use your mono drawing pen, and then we might let that sit for a minute to make sure it's dry, and then I'll show you going over the top with the ABT Pro. It's really, I mean, it's personal preference. I just like to do the lines at the end because then I can gauge where I need to add more detail and little things to make it kind of pop and stand out. All right, so the next petals that I do are usually these 2 on the sides. So we'll just do the exact same thing that we did. We'll make a slightly curved V, and then add some wiggles to join it up, and then just fill it in. And you can, or hopefully you can see in the video, but this top petal is starting to dry, and it's, again, the ink is blending together really nicely to give it a super even finish and really consistent color, which is really pretty. Okay, and then we'll do a petal on the other side. Same thing, curvy V, and some wiggles. And you can do less wiggles or more depending on, you know, how you want your flowers to look. Another tip with using the ABT Pro is the faster you move your hand, the less ink you'll get. So For example, if you just wanted a little bit of color or you're planning to blend them together, you might just move really quickly. But if you really wanted to saturate an area and get really even coverage, move a lot slower, and that ink will really sink into the paper. Okay, and so we just have the two last petals on the bottom, and we just do them the exact same way, and then we'll move on to the stem and the leaves, and then we can try coloring over the top of the mono drawing pen as well, if you'd like to see that. So curvy V, some squiggles, curvy V again, making these two at the bottom a little bit smaller, and then just coloring them in. How's everybody going? And did you all choose pink, or did you choose something else for this flower? I'm curious. Did you choose a different color?
So a couple people did pink, someone did pink and purple, someone did red, someone did a darker pink, so lots of pink.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Well, I do hope that you'll share your creations to social media, and we can just, have a whole huge bouquet of flowers online. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, okay. I love that.
Also, I didn't point this out before, but the ABT Pro palette packs come with this little insert inside, and I actually at home I take them all out and I stack them, and then I've sort of got a container for all my markers to stay in on my desk, which is really useful. I don't think I called that the right thing, Brittany. What do you call this little plastic insert on the inside? I don't know if it has a special name.
So we call it a stackable tray. And so, yep, all of the 12 packs have that. And you may have mentioned this earlier, but something important to know about the ABT Pro is that they should be stored horizontally instead of vertically, so that the ink distributes throughout the whole barrel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the stackable trays are a really smart packaging move. They're so useful. All right, so we're going to do the stem and these leaves, and I'm using the P249, the darker green. And you can see that these leaves I've done kind of just sort of wiggly, just to be a little bit different, a little bit interesting, but you can choose to do leaves like we did on the daisy, or you can do these ones along with me. So I'll use the brush tip for this stem, but you could use the chisel tip as well. And again, we're going to start in between the petals and pushing down fairly firmly to get a larger line, just drawing downwards. And then I'm going to stagger the location of these leaves. So this one will start up a little bit higher. And just drawing kind of a line with a curved top. And then another one. Another one. Come down a little bit. Leave a little bit of space. Another one. And then connect it back up to the stem. Sorry, it's hard to explain how to draw this. Just do some wiggly lines and color it in, and then you've got yourself a leaf. So you can see how beautiful this ink color is. It's really, you know, dark and vibrant and juicy. It's really beautiful. And as I mentioned, you might want to give it a minute and see how it dries, because sometimes it might look a tiny bit lighter, or the color might change ever so slightly as the ink, alcohol ink dries. And then once it's dry, you'll be able to see if you need to go back in to add a little bit more color, or you want to add some shading or that kind of thing. Okay, so the second leaf we're going to do a little bit further down. Same concept, just kind of a wiggly looking leaf. And then fill it in. Any questions? How's everybody going so far?
So Vicky's asking, what are some benefits, some ups and downs of using alcohol-based markers versus water-based markers?
I think it really depends on the effect that you're trying to get, and the project that you're working on. It's like trying to choose between children. I love them both. I love my dual brush pens specifically because I can blend them with water, and you can get kind of a watercolor effect, and you can blend them on different types of paper. The ABT Pros give you a really consistent, even color in a way that I don't think you can get as easily with water-based markers. I think alcohol-based markers are better for that. And you can also layer them in a way, like I mentioned, that means that they don't pick up the ink. You can just layer them really easily and really beautifully. I don't know, Brittany, can you think of anything else? I love them both, but for different reasons. I think they have their own different purposes depending on the project.
I think you said it perfectly.
Well, let me know if you have any other questions. I'm happy to try and answer wherever I can. All right, that flower is done for now. Or actually, no, we're going to add a little bit of detail. I haven't really shown you this yet, but well, I guess we did on the lavender. We used a second color, but I'm going to use the P815, and I'm going to add a little bit more detail. If you can see, I'm going to darken up the center and then add some tiny little flicks of color coming out, just to give it a little bit more interest and show that the petal is a little bit creased and it's not completely flat. So again, just using the brush tip, I'm going to darken the center a little bit. And then just use the very, very tip to flick out a little bit. And you can do 1 or 2 little lines, or 3. Just to give a little bit of little detail. Okay, now we're going to, and you can do multiples, like I said before, the lavender, and you can mix up the colors. We are going to move on. I'll leave these here so you can see them if you're still working. So these little guys, and I think these are called belly buttons, but when I was a kid, I thought they were called belly buttons, and I just thought it was hilarious. And even as an adult, I love them. I think they're awesome. Plus, they're pretty much the easiest thing you could draw. So, and they make great sort of fillers in the back of your bouquet and provide a little pop of yellow. Okay, so I'm going to turn my paper sideways so I can make the most of the paper that I have. And I'm going back to my yellow, which is 991. And I'm going to use the brush tip. And I'm just going to draw a circle. And then fill that in. And you can do 1, 2, 3 on one stem, however many you'd like. So we might do 2. So I'm going to draw another circle over here. My circles are a little bit wonky, but that's okay. Okay, and then we'll do the stem. And again, I think I'm going to use the middle green, the P195. And I'm just going to use the brush tip to pull down a line, a little bit of a curve, and then the same from this other one, joining them up together. Easy. Easiest flower I think you could probably draw. Okay, how's everybody going? Are we ready to move on to some details? Are people still catching up?
I'm seeing a yes. So I think we're good to move on.
Excellent. Okay. So the mono drawing pen come in a lot of different sizes now, which is great. I've chosen the number 1 and the number 3. The number 1 is a really nice thin line. The number 3 is just a little bit thicker if you want a little bit more weight to your details. So starting back with our lavender, which we know is dry now, I can show you on this one. I just went around each of these little petals and down the side of one of the stem, down one side of the stem is what I'm trying to say, just to give it a little bit of shade, as if the sun was kind of coming from this direction, is what I'm imagining in my head. So if you want to join me using the number 1, I want a nice thin line around each of these petals. And you can even just go around half of the petals. You don't need to go around the whole thing. You just want to indicate, you know, where they are separate from each other or a little bit of shadow. Just draw your way around. And of course, you always have the option to just leave them with the ABT Pro. This is just an optional step if you want to add, you know, an additional layer to your flowers. Do you have any more questions or anything while we're adding these details?
Jessica, one person is asking about the color variation when the ABT Pro dries. Do you notice it getting lighter or darker as the color dries?
It's a good question. I think it actually depends a little bit on the color. And Brittany, you might be better placed to explain this, but I assume that it's to do with the alcohol evaporating as it dries. But for example, I'll use the 803. When it goes on, it almost looks a little bit peachy, but you can see as it dries, it's well, it's a slightly different shade. So in this instance, I would say it actually dries a little bit darker. But I feel like some of the other colors dry slightly lighter. I think you just have to get a feel for the colors you're working with and the markers. I always like to have a little bit of like scratch paper on the side just to test out colors and see if it's the one I want to use when I'm creating a piece. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's perfect. That's really good advice.
Okay, I'll just finish off these last few lavender petals here. Okay. All right, so now we'll move over to our daisy. And this is where I do like to separate out the petals using the monodrawing pen, just to give it a little bit more depth so that you can see how some of the petals are behind and some of them are in front. And excuse me, as you can see, I've also added some little dots as well. Well, I don't know if you can see, I've added some dots around the center here and also some lines on the leaves and on the stem, just to give it a little bit of detail and interest. Okay, so again, you can use a number 1, or you can switch to something a little bit bigger. It's totally up to you and the look you want to get. Oh, I feel like somebody asked if I could show them a little bit closer. I don't know if it'll be in focus if I go too close, but hopefully you can see. So I usually start with the center and just draw around that circle. And this is where you can just add some little dots, big ones, some smaller ones. You can add them all over or just around the bottom in kind of a curved shape, if you like. And then we're just going to go around the outside of the petals. And feel free to not make each petal perfectly pointy. You can see here I've given it a little bit of a divot and then drawn a few lines coming in to show that the petals aren't perfect on the edges. They're kind of bunched together a little bit. And you can also add some lines to the center. Like so. So I like to go around and pull out the petals that I think would be in the foreground and in the front here. And then I'll go around and add details to the ones that are kind of behind those petals, if that makes sense. So if you're caught up or you need a little break, I'd love to know in the comments, what is your favorite all-time flower? Do you have a favorite? Do you love them all? Let us know.
So Grace says her favorite is roses. We've got tulips. I don't even know how to pronounce that flower, so I'm not going to try. Tiger lilies, peonies. We have lavender, sunflowers, all flowers. Yeah, lots of different ones. Lotus, tulips, roses, sunflowers.
Oh, they're all so beautiful.
Yes.
Oh yes, succulents, of course. Succulents would be super fun to draw with the ABT Pro markers too. I definitely encourage you to try drawing your favorite flowers or cacti. Yeah, you can do whichever ones are your favorites. All right, so I've done all the petals that I want to be kind of in the front, and now I'm going to go and add detail to all the ones that are behind. I'm just adding these little flicks to the center and the ends of each of the leaves, just for a bit of interest. have to admit, I love flowers. My allergies, though, maybe don't love them quite as much. It's definitely allergy season here in Seattle. Okay, so now I'm going to do just the same thing to the stem. As I showed you here, I might add a few little dots in here to indicate that there's a shadow where it meets the petals, and just a couple of lines on the leaves, keeping it super simple. So just tracing around the outside of my color. And around this leaf. And then just a simple little line, slightly curved on the leaves. And depending on where you put the curve, you can kind of show that the leaf is undulating and not completely flat, if that makes sense. So I'm curving mine upwards a little bit and then straight towards the edge. Okay, how's everybody going? Should we move on to the next flower, or do we need a couple of minutes to catch up?
I think we can move forward.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to this one. It's the same sort of process as on the daisy, but we might add a few more flicks just along the areas of the dark pink. And I'll show you what that looks like. Do the center first. And then I'm just adding these little flicks along the darker color. So you can see that. Just keep working your way all the way around for each of the petals. Going to add some more dots to the center. And then for the outsides of these petals, I might actually switch over to my number 3. So I want them to look a little bit darker. Trace around those wiggly bits. And just keep working your way around each side.
Jessica, do you have a specific type of scissors that you recommend for this project?
You can really use whatever you're comfortable with. I don't know why, I'm not very good at cutting things out. So I usually use a larger pair of just craft scissors to cut each flower out from the page, but then to go around the little details of the leaves, I usually use a small, really sharp pair, and I think these are actually sewing scissors, but they work really well, particularly because this paper is thick, but it's not as thick as like a watercolor paper or something that's a lot more difficult to cut. So these little sharp scissors are great for the smaller details. And you can also see that usually right up to the line. Ooh, am I frozen for everybody or just me? I think it's catching up. Sorry if my internet's cutting out a little bit there. I leave a little white space around the outside. I don't want to accidentally cut off any of the line, and I just sort of like how it looks, but you can choose to cut it out exactly, or maybe not even cut out all the petals at all, but just cut out like a big circle around the top. It's really up to you. But we are almost at that stage. So let's just finish off this guy. I'm going to go back to the number 1 pen and do a couple of just little flicking marks around kind of the valleys, if you will, where I've done the squiggles at the top of the petals. So I'll show you what I mean. Just to really highlight those areas that come down. And just work your way around the outside, giving it a little bit of detail. And then I'm going to move back to the number 3, just to go around the stem and the leaves. Give it a little bit more weight. Hope everybody's having fun. I can't wait to see all of these flowers at the end. And, you know, like I mentioned, you can draw multiples at a time. You can have some fun drawing your own favorite flowers. You know, I can't wait to see what everybody does. So for these leaves, I'm not going to draw a line or anything in the middle. I'm just going to go around the outside. Okay. All right, are we ready to move on to the belly buttons? They're pretty easy. All right, I'm going to stay on the number 3 for these ones. And it's just like the others. I'm going to go around the outside, going to add some dots and then some lines along the stems. Okay, adding some dots just along the bottom. And actually, here's a good place where we could add an additional color. I'm going to use the brown, which is 947. And I'm going to use the pointy tip of the chisel end. And I'm just going to go over the top of each of these black dots with a little bit of brown, just as a secondary layer. Like that. All right. We have finished all of our flowers, but before we actually cut them out, think about what you'd like to put your bouquet in. So I created this just simple little pot, but you could draw and cut out a bow that you want to stick on, or some sort of vase. It's really up to you. If you want to do just a little flower pot, this is the shape that I did. Can you see that edge? Whatever you do, you just want to duplicate it on the other side so that it's even. And you can draw around it in pencil first or whatever you like. I'm just going to use my number 1 drawing pen. I'm just going to trace around this shape to show you what it would look like when it's totally flat. Okay, so that's what the shape would look like if you wanted to do this little simple flower pot. And then to color it in, just choose whatever color you'd like. I'm going to use the chisel tip because it's a large area. And I'm just going to put a layer on one side. I'm not going to worry about coloring in the back because no one's going to see that part of it. Yeah, the chisel tip is great for these big areas where you want a nice solid color. How's everybody doing? Are we all in the same place?
Looks like we're doing good.
Great, thank you. And you can leave your little flower pot one color. You can do what I did here and add some polka dots or maybe some stripes, might be fun. However you want to decorate it. You could add somebody's name if you're planning on sending your bouquet to somebody in particular. Okay. Just going to give that a second to dry, and then I might add some stripes. And I'm going to use the darker blue, which is P476. Oh, and I just realized that we're kind of coming up on an hour, I think. So if you've missed anything, just remember that it's going to be recorded and you can view it tomorrow on Michael's website. And feel free, if you post on social media, to tag myself, Brown Paper Bunny, Michael's Stores, Tombow USA, and the hashtags that we're using are Make It With Michaels and Sharing Art Matters. So we'd love to see your creations. I know some people have to duck out, but otherwise feel free to stick around with me for another minute or two. Okay, now I'm using the dark blue and doing some stripes. I'm using the brush tip and just pressing down slightly so that the lines aren't too thick. Okay, I'm probably not going to cut everything out for you because I'm sure you guys can do that yourselves, but I'll just do one to kind of show you what I do. As I mentioned before, I usually start with my big scissors and just do like a rough cut. I find it easier to cut around the details if I'm not trying to hold the entire piece of paper, but just the one flower. And then I'm switching to my little sharp scissors to do more of the details. And I'm just leaving a small amount of white space, cutting around the stem and the leaves. And working your way around. Yeah, I love that this paper is, like I mentioned, easy to cut, but strong enough that it holds up to several layers of ink. And even when you've got skinny little stems, the flowers aren't going to fall over. It's strong enough to hold them up, which is great. Okay, so once we cut this flower out, I'll just show you how I arrange everything into a bouquet and stick it all down together, and then we'll be finished after that. So just leaving a little bit of space, working around each of the petals. Not cutting them out precisely, but just following the lines that we've drawn. Almost done. How's everybody doing? Okay.
So Jessica,
All right.
Hillary is asking about the blender pen. I don't know while you're cutting or doing something else if you want to explain the blender pen, or I can just respond to her in the chat if that's easier for you.
I don't know if I have a blender pen handy.
Yeah,
but the
they don't
blender
come in
pen,
the 12 packs.
Yeah. The blender pen, oh, I think I do. Hang on. Here's what the blender pen looks like. It's PN00. And so it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Brittany, but it's like a clear ink. And it allows you to blend some of the colors together, or even blend one color sort of out to a fade, if you like. Anything you want to add in addition to that?
Something else that's pretty cool and different about the ABT Pro blender compared to the dual brush pen blender is that the ABT Pro blender can actually kind of repel the ink a little bit, so you can use it to touch up edges. So that's another way that you can use it. You can even do where you like dip the pen, press the pen down on your ink, and you'll actually see the ink kind of spread away from that blender pen.
Right. Well, and I can demonstrate that a little bit if you guys want to see how it works. Let's choose a dark color. Just roughly color in the flower petal. And then using our blender pen, actually I went over the lines in a few areas. I wonder if I can kind of clean them up a little bit. Not sure if you're going to be able to see, but right where I went over the black line, I can use the blender pen and kind of clean that up quite a lot, which is really nice. And then let's see if we can get some fun effects, blending some of the ink away from the center of the petal. Like that.
That's perfect.
Okay, we are ready to do our flower arranging. So this is a really fun part. So once you've got everything cut out, and I realize not all of you will have cut everything right now, but I just want to show you this before we go. Once you've got your flower pot, start with some of the taller things in the back. So just so you can tuck them in, work out where you want to have them. And then once you're sort of happy with the arrangement, you can put down a layer of our Tombow permanent adhesive on the back half, the inside back of your flower pot. And it just rolls on, so it's not messy. There's no waiting around for it to dry or anything. It's really useful. And then just start sticking them on in the order that you had them, and they'll kind of stay put. Put some lavender in the side here, one of these flowers, and you can adjust the height. If you want it to be a little bit shorter, just move it in more. If you want it to stick out, just have it up towards the edge. Just keep sticking them in until you're happy with it. You can do multiple layers to give your flower arrangement around, sorry, can't talk all of a sudden, your flower bouquet or arrangement a little bit of depth as well. Put our daisy in here. And if you find that something's a little bit longer than you'd like, you can always just snip the bottom off, just like you might with the real flowers. And just keep going until you're happy with it. One more piece of lavender. And then just put some permanent adhesive on the other side. Just roll it on and close it up. And if you have any leaves sticking out like I do here, you can just snip them off if you want to tidy it up. But there you have your flower bouquet. You can pop it in an envelope or, you know, stick it in your art journal, whatever you feel like. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. If you have any additional questions, you can find me at Brown Paper Bunny on, well, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. Or you can watch the class again tomorrow if you'd like to. Are there any last questions or anything that I can help people with before we go?
Everyone's saying thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. This was great.
Thank you so much for watching. This has been really fun, and I hope you've had fun creating. And again, we'd love to see it posted to social media so we can take a look. That's it from me. Thanks, everybody.